So on the board, we have an example of a typical Section 3 question. And this question is of the category of questions that we will call next in the series. Now before I actually get to the question on the board, I would just like to take a second to ask that everybody ensure that they've got a piece of paper in front of them, as well as some sort of writing tool like a pencil or a pen, whatever you're comfortable with. And just also note that if at any time during the presentation you feel as if you're a little bit lost or confused, just feel free to just pause the presentation, rewind it, watch it again slower, whatever is necessary, so that you can do it at your own pace. Okay, now back to the question on the board. As I said before, it's a next in the series type of question. So hopefully we can all see that we have got 1, 2, 3, 4 images, and we are being essentially asked, what should the fifth image be? Now with next in the series questions, one of the most important things that we need to ask ourselves in order to figure out what the fifth image should be is, what's changing? Okay? And in order to figure out what's changing, we need to first of all see what's even in the question to begin with. Now I believe image 3 indicates it most clearly, so this is the one I will use as reference, but hopefully we can see that we've got a large white box, we've got a medium-sized blue box, and we've got a small black box. Okay? And these are the things that will be moving around with respect to each other. Now, with a question like this, you may have done some UMAT questions before and seen that you may have objects moving around within a square, within a pentagon, something like that. And hopefully you can see that this question is just a little bit different from that. In fact, it sort of looks like these images are moving relative to each other. There's nothing stationary there that we can say, oh, this is moving in position 1, or in position 2, in position 3. In fact, we have nothing like that. So for these types of questions, what I ask you guys to attempt to do is have a look and say, is there anything, because we have nothing that is stationary, just say, let's make one of them stationary. So me personally, when I see a question like this, I like to pick the biggest one. It's the easiest one to deal with. So I look at the big white box and I say, okay, pretend that box isn't moving. Okay. What happens to the other shapes? Now hopefully we can already see that we may encounter a little bit of difficulty in doing this question. Why? Is because we've got 4 separate images. 4 separate images, especially if you're really long into this exam, let's say you're 2 hours into the exam and you're not really focusing as well as you could, it can be very difficult for us to wrap our heads around. So in this video, we're going to be covering a technique called mapping, and that's going to make this infinitely easier for all of us. Okay. Now, as I said before, we have taken this white box and we are considering it stationary. With mapping, what that essentially means is we take that stationary image, which I'm going to draw over here, okay, and let's say we want to deal with the small black box first. Well, what I'm going to do is after I've drawn my stationary object, I'm going to label it with a nice little black box there to indicate that this map represents the black box. Now what is mapping? Mapping essentially allows us to take these 4 set images and put them into one place, making it very easy for us to see where things are changing. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we've already drawn our stationary image, and now we just have to ask ourselves, since we're dealing with the black box, let's start off with the first position. We say, where is that small black box with respect to our stationary image, which remember we said is the white one, in the first one? Hopefully we can see that if here is the stationary white box, the black box is 1 to the left of it. So just to recap, in the first image, the black box is 1 to the left of our stationary black box. And how do we represent that in our map? Well, it's nice and easy. All we do is we put a little 1, okay, which means in the first image, the black box is 1 to the left of our stationary object. And then we just do that again for number 2. We ask ourselves, in number 2, where is the black box? Well, hopefully we can see that in number 2, the black box is in the same position as our white box. So how do we represent that? Well, it's nice and easy. We just put a 2 in there, which says, in number 2, the black box is in the same position as the white box. And then we do the same thing. What about in number 3? Well, in number 3, we can hopefully see that it's 1 to the right. So doing that, we'll put the 3 over there. And finally, in number 4, we can see that it's back again in the same spot it was in number 2, being in the same spot as the white one. We'll put a 4 there. Now, I would like everyone to just pause the presentation in a moment and just have a little think about what we've drawn here. Have a look at these numbers. We said it goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and we need to ask ourselves where number 5 is. So I want you to just pause the presentation and just try and write down where you reckon number 5 should be. So pause the presentation now. Okay, so after you've done that, hopefully we were all able to notice that number 5 should go there. And if not, I'll just go over it and explain to you guys why. We're going from 1 to 2. Hopefully we can see that from 1 to 2, we've only moved one space. In fact, we've moved one space to the right. Okay, as you can see there. So I'm going to call that moving +1 positions. Okay. Now from 2 to 3, what happened? Well, we just did the same thing. We went from 2 to 3, we moved one space. So we went +1 again. But then things got a little bit tricky. The direction reversed, didn't it? We can't say it kept going one space forward, because then we should have had our number 4 over here. That's not what happened. In fact, our number 4 was back one space. So how do we represent that? I'm just going to call that -1. And that continued again. Okay? We see that the -1 happened there, and logically speaking, because remember, section 3 is all about what makes the most logical sense in the pattern. Logically speaking, if we've gone +1, +1, -1, we should continue this negative direction. So following the -1, we should again see another -1, which would explain why after 4, we get 5 in that position over there. So what does that mean for us? Well, what that means is, in this question mark space here, our final answer, which I've given a space over here to draw, should have the big white box over here, and 1 to the left of its position should be where the small white box goes, as such. And now we have to do the same thing for the medium-sized box, because we have 2 things to take care of. So again, we're going to do the exact same technique. First, we need to draw out the stationary object, which, as I've said before, is the big white box. We're going to label it. So this is going to be the medium-sized blue box. And again, we ask ourselves, in picture 1, where is the medium-sized box? Well, here we can see that the medium-sized box is in the same position as the white box. So what do? We will indicate that by putting a 1 in that position there. And we do the same thing. In 2, it is 1 to the right. In 3, it is now 1 to the left. And in 4, it is back in the same position it was in number 1. Now, just like we did with the small box, I would like you guys to just pause the presentation quickly and ask yourselves, where should number 5 go in this question? So pause the presentation and have a shot yourselves. Okay. Now, once you've done that, I can already foresee that we will probably have 2 different answer options depending on your way of thinking of this. So please pay attention and see which one of these you've decided. I know a lot of people will have most likely have put their number 5 as that, which makes a lot of sense. I can understand why people make this. In fact, it's a very common mistake. But unfortunately, yes, it is a mistake. So if you did decide that number 5 should have gone there, please pay attention as we explain why that is not in fact the case. Okay. So this is not exactly where it should go, but a lot of people are likely to pick this one. In fact, the correct answer is number 5 should be over here, 2 to the left of that white box. Now let's quickly explain why. In this first situation here with the small box, we saw it move forward once, then twice, and then without a shadow of doubt, we know, because we've got 4 boxes here, we saw it go in the opposite direction. So we know that it has this pattern of moving forward once, moving forward again, and then backward once. So it makes a lot of sense for us to say it moves backwards one more time. But what about here? What actually happened? We saw it move forward once. Okay. Now the people that picked 5 here, what I'm assuming you guys did was, you said it moved forward once, and you said, oh, let's let it move forward one more time. And we said, if it moves forward one more time, it should wrap itself around and come back to there in 3. Kind of like if you imagine it sort of teleports. Right? It comes back around to number 3, and then moves forward once again to 4, and we said it moves forward one more time to 5. Makes a lot of sense, but we have to ask ourselves, why did we assume it can randomly reappear back on the other side? You can say, and you're very right in saying, well, in that question over there, sorry, not question, in this map over there, it did that. But unfortunately for us, we only saw it move forward once. Okay? That's the key difference. That one there we see it do it twice, and then turn around. This one we did not. So in actual fact, we have no indication as to why it should wrap around itself after reaching that position. Okay? I mean, in all honesty, when we did this question, we picked this box here as being stationary. Why? Well, I just decided to do it that way. You could have just as easily have said, pick the middle box as being stationary, or pick the small box as being stationary. And the way these would have worked would have been a little bit different. The answers will still be the same, but you may not have seen this wrapping around sort of pattern. That only occurred since we picked the big box as stationary. So yes, unfortunately, we cannot actually assume that it hits an invisible wall and wraps itself around. No, the only other way we can make sense of this motion here is in fact to say it moves forward, and then it moves backwards some as well. So let's have a little look at that, and let's zoom in on this. So So we started here in 1, and we've moved to number 2. Again, very similar to that one over there, we will call that moving +1 positions. But what happened between 2 and 3? Well, as I said, we can't just say it moved 1 again and then reappeared back here in 3. No, we have to instead say it moves backwards 2 spaces. I'll do that again. From 2, we move back 1 space to go there, and backwards another space to end up there in 3. So how do we denote that? Well, if going this way is +1, it should be -2. And then we continue that. From 3 to 4, what happens? Well, from 3 to 4, it's just that +1 thing again, right? Because we moved forward once. So +1, -2, +1. Hopefully we can all see it. We've got this +1, -2, +1 pattern happening here. What should happen next? Hopefully we can see that that should also be a -2 again. And from -2, from where we are in position 4, what happens? Well, we go -1 to position 3, we go -1 again to where we have position 5. So this is in fact where our fifth answer option should be. And again, how do we do this to get our answer? Well, we have to go back to this image here. And we say number 5 for our blue medium-sized box should be 2 to the left of our big white box. So how we do that? Well, we just draw it in like that. So our final answer option should look something like this. If at any point in this presentation you were a bit confused, please feel free to rewind it, have a listen to it again, as many times as you need until you understand this, because this idea of mapping is very key and very important throughout your studies in section 3.